Hello, and welcome to this very special event. My name is Mark Billingham. I'm a crime writer, and for the next half hour or so, I'll be hosting an interview with fellow crime writer Robert Galbraith. Now, although I write about a detective, I'm not actually a detective myself. That said, my powers of deduction would be pretty dismal if I hadn't been able to work out, along with the rest of the world, that Robert Galbraith is a pseudonym for a writer you may have heard of called J.K. Rowling. Surprise! This has, of course, been a very dark and strange year, and because of COVID, we've all had to do things a little differently. Author events are no exception. So although I'm sitting here in a pub that fans of the TV adaptations may recognise, I spoke to Joe via the miracle of Zoom to find out more about the Strike books, and particularly the fifth instalment of the series, Troubled Blood. Great crime fiction depends on all sorts of things. Location and tone, and a nice twisty plot that keeps the pages turning as secrets are revealed. But for me, it all comes down to character. Sherlock Holmes, Inspector Morse, Jack Reacher. In the end, it's the characters we come back to. When I read The Cuckoo's Calling, the first Robert Galbraith novel, and this was when I had no idea who Robert Galbraith actually was, I knew straight away that Cormorana Strike'a was a character that was going to be around for a while. In fact, it felt like he already had been. Now, we're going to meet him again, because Joe's going to kick things off with a reading from Troubled Blood. I should warn viewers that the extract contains a smattering of industrial language and some graphic content. Well, of course it does. It's a crime novel. But I'm just saying that those of a nervous disposition might want to have a strong drink handy. I've already got mine.
"Excuse me," a woman said nervously from behind him. Strike knew without turning that it was the dark woman from the pub. She had a home county's accent, and her tone contained that precise mixture of apology and excitement that he usually encountered in those who wanted to talk about his detective triumphs. "Yes," he said, turning to face the speaker. Her blonde friend had come with her, or perhaps, thought Strike, they were more than friends. An indefinable sense of closeness seemed to bind the two women, whom he judged to be around 40. They wore jeans and shirts, and the blonde in particular had the slightly weather-beaten leanness that suggests weekends spent hill walking or cycling. She was what some would call a handsome woman, by which they meant that she was barefaced. High cheekboned, bespectacled, her hair pulled back into a ponytail, she also looked stern. The dark woman was slighter in build. Her large grey eyes shone palely in her long face. She had an air of intensity, even of fanaticism about her in the half-light, like a medieval martyr. Are you Cormorana Strike'a?" she asked. "Yes," he said, his tone uninviting. "Oh," she breathed, with an agitated little hand gesture. This is so strange. I know you probably don't want to be. I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're off duty." She gave a nervous laugh. "But my name's Anna, by the way. I wondered," she took a deep breath, whether I could come and talk to you about my mother." Strike said nothing. "She disappeared," Anna went on. "Margot Bambra's her name. She was a GP. She finished work one evening, walked out of her practice, and nobody's seen her since." "Have you contacted the police?" asked Strike. Anna gave an odd little laugh. "Oh, yes, I mean, they knew, they investigated, but they never found anything. She disappeared," said Anna, "in 1974. The dark water lapped the stone, and Strike thought he could hear the seal clearing its damp nostrils. 3 drunk youths went weaving past on their way to the ferry point. Strike wondered whether they knew the last ferry had been and gone at 6. "I just," said the woman in a rush, "you see, last week I went to see a medium." Thought Strike. He'd occasionally bumped up against the purveyors of paranormal insights during his detective career, and felt nothing but contempt for them, leeches, or so he saw them, of money from the pockets of the deluded and the desperate. A motorboat came chugging across the water, its engine grinding the night stillness to pieces. Apparently this was the lift the 3 drunk boys were waiting for. They now began laughing and elbowing each other at the prospect of imminent seasickness. "The medium told me I'd get a leading," Anna pressed on. She told me, "You're going to find out what happened to your mother. You'll get a leading and you must follow it. The way will become clear very soon." So when I saw you just now in the pub, Cormorana Strike'a in the Victory, it just seemed such an incredible coincidence, and I thought I had to speak to you. A soft breeze ruffled Anna's dark, silver-streaked hair. The blonde said crisply, "Come on, Anna, we should get going." She put an arm around the other's shoulders. Strike saw a wedding ring shining there. "We're sorry to have bothered you," she told Strike. With gentle pressure, the blonde attempted to turn Anna away. The latter sniffed and muttered, "Sorry, I probably had too much wine." "Hang on." Strike often resented his own incurable urge to know, his inability to leave an itch unscratched, especially when he was as tired and aggravated as he was tonight. But 1974 was the year of his own birth. Margot Bambra had been missing as long as he'd been alive. He couldn't help it. He wanted to know more. "Are you on holiday here?" "Yes." It was the blonde who had spoken. "Well, we've got a second home in Falmouth. Our permanent base is in London." "I'm heading back there tomorrow," said Strike. "What the are you doing?" asked a voice in his head. "But I could probably swing by and see you tomorrow morning in Falmouth, if you're free." "Really?" gasped Anna. He hadn't seen her eyes fill with tears, but he knew they must have done because she now wiped them. "Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. I'll give you the address." The blonde showed no enthusiasm at the prospect of seeing Strike again. However, when Anna started fumbling through her handbag, she said, "It's all right, I've got a card," and pulled a wallet out of her back pocket and handed Strike a business card bearing the name Dr. Kim Sullivan, BPS registered psychologist, with an address in Falmouth printed below it. "Great," said Strike, inserting it into his own wallet. "Well, I'll see you both tomorrow morning then." "I've actually got a work conference call in the morning," said Kim. "I'll be free by 12. Will that be too late for you?" The implication was clear. "You're not speaking to Anna without me present." "No, that will be fine," said Strike. "I'll see you at 12 then." "Thank you so much," said Anna. Kim reached for Anna's hand and the two women walked away. Strike watched them pass under a streetlight before turning back towards the sea. The motorboat carrying the young drinkers had now chugged away again. It already looked tiny, dwarfed by the wide bay. The roar of its engine gradually deadened into a distant buzz. Forgetting momentarily about texting Robin, Strike lit a second cigarette, took out his mobile, and Googled Margot Bambra. 2 different photographs appeared. The first was a grainy head and shoulders shot of an attractive, even-featured face with wide-set eyes, her wavy dark blonde hair centre-parted. She was wearing a long lapelled blouse under what appeared to be a knitted tank top. The second picture showed the same woman, looking younger and wearing the famous black corset of a Playboy bunny, accessorized with black ears, black stockings, and white tail. She was holding a tray of what looked like cigarettes and smiling at the camera. Another young woman, identically dressed, stood beaming behind her, slightly buck-toothed and curvier than her willowy friend. Strike scrolled down until he read a famous name in conjunction with Margot's. Young doctor and mother Margot Bambra, whose disappearance on the 11th of October 1974 shared certain features with Creed's abductions of Vera Kenny and Gail Reitman. Bambra, who worked at the St. John's medical practice in Clerkenwell, had arranged to meet a female friend in the local Three Kings pub at 6 o'clock. She never arrived. Several witnesses saw a small white van driving at speed in the area around the time that Bambra would have been heading for her rendezvous. D.I. Bill Talbot, who led the investigation into Bambra's disappearance, was convinced from an early stage that the young doctor had fallen victim to the serial killer known to be at large in the southeast area. However, no trace of Bambra was discovered in the basement flat where Dennis Creed imprisoned, tortured, and killed 7 other women.
So, welcome back, Cormorana Strike'a, and an introduction there to the decades-old case that he and Robin are going to be investigating in Troubled Blood. When we spoke, I asked Jo why she had decided to write about a case such as this, and about some of the other themes she tackles in the new book. So Jo, Troubled Blood centres around a decades-old missing persons case, which is almost certainly a murder. So what made you decide to write about a cold case?
So in the Galbraith books, I try and do a very different kind of plot each time, and I've been planning a cold case for a while. The themes in the book of loss and distance and separation just felt right. A female doctor left her practice at the end of the working day and was literally never seen again. So what happened to her on this short walk, what should have been a 5-minute walk to the pub to meet a friend?
The book also contains themes of mysticism, clairvoyance and the supernatural. What made you want to write about those things?
I'm very interested in the function superstition fulfills for human beings. And this was a way of exploring how, when we don't know, we tend to fill the space with our own theories, hopes. And the investigating officer has a breakdown and he believes he can solve the case through occult means, which is one of the reasons it's never been solved, because he left such a mess behind him. I can't give too much away, but he looks at tarot cards and he looks at astrology, and Strike and Robin inherit a very strange set of notes.
So broadly speaking, we know what Troubled Blood is about, but what other themes were you keen to explore in the book?
One of the major themes in the book is it's an exploration of the changing nature of feminism, because the doctor who disappeared was an ardent feminist, and different takes, I suppose, on femininity and what is expected from women. Robin, as I said, turns 30 in the book, and she's starting to face the question, will I ever have children? People around her are starting to have babies. So, and she faces certain challenges as a woman in this book. She's the youngest person at the agency, but is left in charge of it for a while. So, and she's managing men who are older than her and possibly don't think she should be in charge of the group meetings. So all of that I explore. And then the question is, who killed this doctor? And there was a serial killer who was based on a real life killer called Jerry Brudos, who was active in the 60s. This is the real character, and my serial killer was active in the 60s and 70s. And obviously there we're examining woman hate, duplicity, and yes, misogyny, I suppose. So that's a big theme in the book, including one, I'm smiling because I think it has funny aspects, but one big row between Strike and Robin about Strike putting certain expectations on her because she is the woman. You know, remember to be polite to people, where he doesn't bother.
Now, at least one version of the crime in Troubled Blood comes from someone with a very warped perception of what may have happened. Do you think crime novels need unreliable narrators?
I think that crime novels gain from having witnesses who do not perfectly recall, because that's real life. I remember things that interest me, so I would probably put myself into the unreliable witness category, because I have very clear memories of things that I'm interested in, which is sometimes small details, but I'm unreliable on times and dates. So I have some sympathy for some of the suspects, and the witnesses, I should say, in this case, who don't quite remember what they saw.
Now, the fact that I'm here and Jo, by necessity, is somewhere else, isn't the only thing that makes this event unusual. Over the past week, fans across the Robert Galbraith Facebook and Instagram channels have been voting to choose which questions they would like answered. There's a whole range of topics, including Jo's writing process, where she gets inspiration from, the role music plays in the books, and, of course, when it comes to the relationship between Strike and Robin, the always popular will they, won't they question. So, here's what the fans really wanted to know. OK, let's talk a little bit about the TV adaptations. Obviously, it's just finished on the BBC. Has seeing Tom Burke's portrayal of Strike in the TV adaptations influenced the way you see the character now, the way you write about the character now?
I get asked this a lot because I've been fortunate enough for my books to be made into TV shows and movies. And the honest answer is no. I still see the Strike in my head, who's very vivid to me when I'm writing the books. And I'm sure Tom won't mind me saying this, or Holiday either. They're both better looking than the people I'm carrying around in my head with me, but that's TV. No, the character really still comes from the same place he always came from. Having said that, I absolutely love the TV series. I'm obviously involved as a producer, so I'm really proud of what we've done with the adaptations.
Robin has been through a lot, a hell of a lot, but she still puts herself in harm's way for the sake of the investigation. What makes Robin so brave, so courageous?
Well, I think that, it's not bravery unless you're scared. If you're not scared, it's not brave to do it, right? In the last book, Lethal White, and in this book, Troubled Blood, I hope the reader understands that she has been fighting to return to the person she should have been. In other words, she was always planning to do something of this nature, and then her life was derailed by something very bad that happened to her. And I see her as having lost 5 years, the 5 years that she was with her boyfriend from school, who she then married because that was a place of safety to her. And we're now seeing her work her way back very bravely and through certain challenges back to the person that I think she was always destined to be. I think Robin makes a far better detective than I ever would. And she has skills that I don't have. She can drive very well, and I can't drive at all. But there is a bit of my life experience in Robin. That feeling of being compelled to do what scares you is certainly something that I can empathise with.
Well, we've talked a little bit about their professional relationship, but their personal relationship is obviously really important in the books. And we go into it in a lot more depth in Troubled Blood. And this is a question I know lots of people are going to want answered. And it's a question you're obviously expecting. Will Robin and Strike ever get together? My honest answer is I think they're both quite damaged people. Robin's damage is very obvious. It's been explicit since, I think, the third book. I'm trying to remember when she told Strike what had happened to her. I think it's book 3, yes. That she has been through something very traumatic, and that affected her relationships and it affected her life. Now, his trauma is very obvious also. He's lost a leg, but I think he's quite damaged. And in this book, emotionally, and you see in this book what his childhood was. And it was a very odd childhood and a very disrupted one. So my feeling has always been that they need to do a degree of healing before they are fit, or he particularly is fit to have a relationship of the kind I know a lot of readers would like them to have. They do take a big step forward in this book, but it's not quite the step forward I think some people would want to see. It seems to me that Strike is attracted to drama. There's a line in Troubled Blood where Robin says something like, he doesn't want things to be easy. If it's easy, he's not interested. He likes to take the hard path. Would you agree with that? I think that's exactly right. He does. People like that can be difficult to be around if a settled life is not what they want. He's asking himself some hard questions about what he really wants, and in this book he does start asking questions. On a couple of occasions, he witnesses a birthday of a very old lady, and it does pass his mind, if I reach that age, who'll be there with me? So it's not that he doesn't acknowledge that there is an attraction to a more settled life, but I think he really fears it. I think he fears it because he's never seen a model of a successful relationship that he would aspire to. That's his problem. Well, is it his problem if he's happy, So let's talk a little about what inspires you. So in Career of Evil, where did the character of Shankar come from? Where did he pop up from? Shankar was actually created in, I think 2010. So I created Shankar a long time before you saw him. Strike actually makes contact with him in the first book, but you don't see him, you don't meet Shankar, and I knew he would appear down the line. So he's got this old friend who clearly is criminal. And I was looking forward to Shankar's first appearance because I always liked him a lot as a character, but a little of Shankar goes a long way. People like him as a character, but you don't want him to, I always say, you don't want him to turn into Huggy Bear from Starsky and Hutch, where every case, you immediately go and ask Shankar what the word on the street is. He has a very specific function in the book. In other words, he's got contacts who could give him information that he wouldn't otherwise be able to get.
But he always has to pay. And that's one of the things I like about Shankar as a character. There's no sentimentality. He wants money for everything he does.
Digging a bit deeper into your imagination and your process, tell me this, does it start with the crime or with the motive, or does it come from character?
Nearly always, I start with how it was done. So I'm often asked, which is a reasonable question because I know other crime writers do this differently. Do you know who did it when you start? And I always know who did it, and I always know how they did it. Yeah, with each of the strikes, I knew exactly how the crime was done before I started, and I really work outwards from there. So with Lethal White, I definitely started with this idea of the lethal white foal and really built outwards, symbolically. And I knew that that plot would have to take us somewhere rural to get near actual horses. Actually, that led to a nice bit of character between Strike and Robin, because he really does not like horses. And Robin obviously grew up in Yorkshire and had a fairly scrubby pony. And that's one of the things that makes Strike think she's quite middle class and quite safe when he first meets her. She seems that kind of girl, though that's not really who she is at all.
There's an awful lot of music dotted throughout the book, a lot of references to specific songs. Do you have a particular artist in mind before you start a novel, or does it just come as you write?
In the 4 previous Strike books, it sort of came to me as I wrote. I would, because I'm writing on a bit of a lag, which is actually has been a relief to me, because I can do at least 1 or 2 more books before I have to deal with the pandemic, which I think for a lot of crime writers is going to be a real challenge. I tend to look up what was current at the time to see what would have been playing on the radio. But with this book was different, because I wanted the disappeared doctor to be as real a person as I could make her to the reader. And I thought, what would she have listened to? What artists would she have liked? And I looked up the albums that came out before she disappeared in 1974. And of course, Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark came out. Now, before I started writing this book about 2 years ago, if you'd said to me, do you like Joni Mitchell? I would have said yes. I would have said, well, I own Blue. Everyone owns Blue, the album Blue. And I knew a couple of other songs. And it's fair to say that I have now become a Joni Mitchell obsessive. I mean, I own everything she's done. I started listening to Court and Spark, and now I own everything. So that's never happened to me before, that I find something through the writing that then becomes a real personal passion. But her music weaves its way through the book. And in the process of writing about Margot's love of Joni Mitchell, I ended up completely in love with Joni Mitchell.
I know that Tom and Holiday are a little bit better looking than the characters that you imagined, but in what other ways are they different? How close are they to the characters you had in your head? And how have they grown into the roles?
Both of them have been absolutely amazing. I mean, I love watching them. I think they do a magnificent job, and on screen, the characters really are the characters that I imagined. They really understand the characters, both of them. They've been magnificent. I've been lucky enough to watch some filming, and it's always fascinating to watch really good actors work. I think they've both just made those roles. They've taken them to a different place. You know, I just love watching it. It can never be exactly what it was in the book, but I think overall that these have been very faithful adaptations.
How does a city like London keep inspiring you and informing your writing? It's the perfect place to set a crime novel, right?
It's the perfect city to set a crime novel in. You'll never, ever, no writer could ever exhaust London as a location. It's big, it's so storied. You've got remnants of medieval times, you've got hyper-modern tower blocks, you've got all these little nooks and crannies that I get to explore as I'm researching for the settings of books, because I very rarely invent locations. I like to base everything in real London. And in this book, for Troubled Blood, I got to know Clerkenwell really well. This little patch that my fictional doctor walked, and the line she took to the pub and the place where she disappeared, I know it like the back of my hand. I went back and walked it a lot to make sure that what I thought had happened could happen. And I researched a lot about Clerkenwell, and I loved it. It's part of writing the Strike books that I really love, getting to know London better.
Now, Joe, I know you're working on the next novel. Is there anything you can tell readers/viewers about the next Strike adventure?
The next one will be very, very different from Troubled Blood. In Troubled Blood, we spent a lot of time speaking to older people sitting on their sofas because, of course, Margot Bamborough, the vanished doctor, remains forever 29, but everyone who worked with her and knew her is a lot older. We're dealing in the next Strike novel with a far younger demographic, which will be exciting for me. I just like to ring the changes a lot, so it's going to be a very different kind of investigation.
Well, all writers work differently, of course, and when it comes to how we write, every writer I know would probably have very different answers. Personally, all I have is a whiteboard in my office with 3 simple instructions: get dressed, buy cheese, write novel. But fascinating to hear how Joe approaches writing. And I know that fans of the series are going to be salivating at the thought of Strike and Robin's relationship taking a major step forward. Thanks so much for watching. Happy reading and good health.